Hello and welcome to Grinding Meaning number 47, the Kingdom of God and the Kingdom of Man. Also could be, in what I'm doing, described as natural reality and social reality. My stream does not seem to have it. There it goes. Okay. Oh, volume. Turn. There we go. I suppose I should first kind of explain this graphic. I didn't get it from anywhere. This is from my personal experience and opinion that we are dualistic beings in a number of ways. Like we have a nature, the way that we really are, and then we have a narrative, which is the story we tell ourselves about what we are. And the closer those align, the more actualized a person is. And the greater the schism, the more, can't think of a nice way to say this, the more screwed up a person is. Let me define what I mean by those terms, because there are some sociological terms, they're used in some, these terms exist elsewhere, but they have really unhelpful definitions that ignore important stuff, like the subconscious, which I'm kind of critical of psychology. It's like they discovered that most of our decision-making happens on an unconscious level, but they keep just working from the assumption that people consciously decide things and then do them, and that all the real important stuff that's happening under the surface doesn't seem to be considered very often. So, my definitions of natural and social reality. Okay, natural reality is the reality that exists independent of what anybody thinks about it. It keeps going even if there are no humans and just does what it does. Basically, a deterministic system. Social reality, simply put, is everything that disappears if there were only one human. Now, it doesn't have to mean just one human existence, but one human completely isolated with no expectation of ever interacting with another human being. So, this image describes, it has a big section in the middle for normal people, and the others are described by essentially your detachment from the other. So autistic people, generally speaking, are very much detached from the social reality. We don't get it. We weren't born with the hardware to unconsciously process these interactions, and it's difficult to inculcate us into social systems because we just don't have the hardware. Our 28 baud modem, is just not up to the challenge of having updates to the social reality uploaded to us. Then introverts, in my opinion, are a lesser version of that. They're just not as, basically, the left side, the blue side, is a lack of attunement to the social reality, and the right side is a lack of attunement to the natural reality. And the further you get out, the further your detachment from the opposite side. As a person who's far more autistic than anyone would ever guess, I had to come a very long way and consciously gain a conscious understanding of what, normal people and even introverts, and of course, basically everybody but the autistic gets this stuff. Introverts not as much. I had to figure it out consciously, so I have a different kind of access to an understanding of why people do what they do, because I had to figure it out. It didn't come, it's not processed unconsciously as it is in more neurotypical people. So yeah, basically autistic people just can't really connect to the social realm, and sociopathic people don't really. It's not. It can happen more than one way. You could just be biologically sociopathic, as I see it, and by sociopathic, I just mean you are adept in the social realm, but you. I'm not explaining this well. Sociopathy is such a muddy word, and it's used in so many different ways. And even you talk to different psychologists, and they'll be operating from different definitions. So it's kind of basically a screwed up person who doesn't, because compassion for others, self-sacrifice, benevolence, these are natural things. Of course, their opposites are also natural, but someone who developed normally in a more or less good society will have these features enhanced. And there are people who will never acquire these features, and some people who are damaged in such a way that they're not real to them. And that's what I'm going to be describing as sociopathy. Another interesting thing is social interaction, especially increasing with the numbers of people, will always be draining to an introvert, since they have to consciously process a lot of this. It is a drain. And even if the person's having fun, even if they're adept, and I'll use myself as an example, like going out and doing stuff with groups of people, that can be a blast, and it often is. And I can be having fun, I can be quite adept, but my social skills have come so far where I'm much better than the average person, whereas you go, about 10 years ago, I caught up to the average person. You go 20 years ago, I was a fair bit behind. You go 30 years ago, I was way behind. You go 40 years ago, well, let's not give up my age just yet. And it's always going to drain me because I don't have the built-in hardware to process that unconsciously. Whereas extroverts are attuned more. You will attune to what you can connect to. So that's why I say the blue side is a lack of connection to the social, because you just don't have it, and you will gravitate towards whatever you have a connection to. This is where you get the autistic savants, to where they all their brain gets repurposed towards natural stuff. It'd be mathematics, physics, things like that, where they seem to have almost a preternatural ability with things. And we're just talking about the savants, but and a lot of times it doesn't mean you are going to be that, but that's sort of how that happens. Parts of your brain that would have been used to navigate social realities has been repurposed, you could say. And extroverts are charged by social activity. In fact, they become unstable, it might be too strong a word, if they lose access to social. Oh, I was going to start. I would have blended in one of my animations to go behind this to give something pretty to look at while I'm talking. And the thing is about the social reality, it's a magical realm. People with high status can manipulate it, almost like magic. And this was really, really confusing to me as a child, because I just didn't understand. I could see what had happened, and then someone who was popular or an authority figure could just dictate that something else had happened, and if they had enough status within the people that were there, they would just suddenly start believing the same thing that person said. And it could be something simple like red and blue, or a sequence of events, or something like that. And people are like, and they're not like, this is, not like sucking up to the person. They're not just like saying what they think the person wants to hear. They will legitimately believe and have the experience as described by the person with the status. And this is baffling to me. And there's kind of A simple example that I've run into a lot playing World of Warcraft Classic and original World of Warcraft was that you would know your class and the mechanics backward and forward. It's not, you're so far past some aspect of the game. And then someone will be talking and it's clear that they really don't understand this one particular aspect, but they're presenting themselves as if, they're an authority. And for example, someone talking about armor reduction, and I had said, yeah, it doesn't really help the druids that much because a lot of their threat comes from bleed damage. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, bleed effects ignore armor. No, they don't. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point of a bleed effect. And you run into this, well, I'm the class leader, so what I'm saying must be right. Status equals correct. And this is just a miniature example, but this happens everywhere. Like a person with more status is automatically correct. And people will just go with it without even really thinking about it. They get the update from the social reality. And I don't want to make it sound like this is bad. The value of getting everyone on the same page often trumps what's literally true as far as being effective. One of the things when I first started being in charge of printing crews was I would have my idea of how to deal with a particular situation. But I would ask other people, it's like, what do you think we should do? And a lot of times I would get a suggestion that I'm sure wasn't as good as mine, but there wasn't like a massive difference. It was almost as good. But I would go with that person's idea. Why? Because that's buy-in. That is, they will work a lot harder for an idea that they support than one that someone else does. And if you spread this around, you end up having a more cohesive crew. The loss in efficiency because of it not being quite as good a way of doing it is more than outweighed by having everybody on the same page. And, well, cults are a good example of a social reality because it's kind of enclosed. They tend to barricade themselves off from other social realities and then cut the people off from interacting with those that don't believe the same thing. And these can go very, very badly as the social power of the cult leader can just start dictating the most crazy things that would seem crazy from the outside, but the people inside will believe it because that person has the status to dictate the social reality of their situation. This also happens with there are leaders who of like kingdoms or cities or countries who have kind of lost. We would say that they lost their marbles, or that they were delusional, but I want to say it was Caligula was offended that the tide was going to come in, that it didn't respect his authority. And if I'm remembering it right, he literally ordered his army to go onto the beach and prevent the tide from coming in, and literally made them go out and try. I seem to remember a story about a city. This might be a real story, might be made up, but about a city that was going underwater, and how the guy with the high status, leader person did not believe it was happening and was able to convince the people around him that it wasn't happening. And as the water is going up to their ankles and then to their knees, no one believed it was actually happening. This is just the power of a high status person in a social reality. And it does operate very much like magic. This is the ability to dictate reality is very intoxicating, and it is part of why people want power so much, because there's like more than three, but basically three elements. Status, money, and power are interchangeable commodities. Excuse me 1 second. You can turn money into status. You can turn money into power. You can turn power into status. And the thing is, once you gather a certain amount of power, sort of the rule of mass generates more mass comes into play. As you get more, it's easier to acquire more. And you would think that this could be a runaway effect, but there is a counterbalancing force, which I'll get to in a second. For most people, the desire for power is the desire to remove limits on behavior, to act out a dark nature that is currently restrained by social norms. It is my opinion, and I think I'm in disagreement with many more educated and intelligent people, but it's my opinion that power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And the search for power is the desire to self-actualize, not by changing your narrative to match your nature, but to remove the restraints that cause you to restrain your nature or risk getting ostracized. Because as you become more powerful, you can get away with things other people can't, which is a display of power in itself. But for many, especially the people who really want the power, they want to do some dark crap, and if you don't have enough power, you'll pay for it. Power causes a departure from natural reality. This corruption leads to an end of that power. Basically, as you get further and further departed from natural reality, which as you become more socially powerful, the power goes to your head. And that the idea that there are things that you can't, that your power has no effect over, is unpleasant, and the more power you get, the more likely you are to make mistakes that will cost you. In the natural reality, you have no power over. Excuse me. Here's where the kingdom of God and the kingdom of man become analogous to natural reality and social reality. And I think this might be what the Bible is capturing in that analogy? Not sure that's the right word. That if a person, like being with God, which is a respect for natural reality, if what you're doing comports to nature, if you are adapting yourself to the realities in which you find yourself, you will be more effective than if you're trying to impose your idea of how things should be on a reality that either will ignore you or is hard to push against. So there are many stories in the Bible of someone being with God, and as soon as they gain power, or sometime afterwards, they turn their back on God, which could also be stated as they lose their respect for nature and decide that they can start dictating reality. Excuse me, one more second. Turning your back on God, or natural reality, always leads to a fall, as your existence primarily resides in the malleable social reality, aka the kingdom of man. Humans have a nature. It can be influenced, but some elements cannot be purged. Social animals will always exist in hierarchies. Human social systems will always have property and markets. Certain ideologies claim, if given enough power, they can remove these things for the good of all. This is magical thinking, like belief in levitation. This is a rejection of natural reality, which you could call corruption. This lust for power is really a hunger to act out their dark nature on the masses, a sociopathic denial of nature, and the desire to dictate reality. The oldest and most consistent definition of a god: he that can speak things into existence. I'm the Expert Layman. You all have a great day.